Okay, so the next presenter is now Khushbu, last one for the day.
Okay, good evening, respected sir and my dear friends. Today I'm going to talk on post-colonial studies. First of all, what is post-colonial studies? The critical analysis of the history, culture, literature, and modes of discourse that are specific to the former colonies of England, Spain, France, and other European imperial powers. There are several central and recurrent issues in post-colonial studies. The rejection of the master narrative of Western imperialism, in which the colonial other is not only the subordinated and marginalized, but in effect deleted as a cultural agency, and its replacement by a counter narrative in which the colonial cultures fight their way back into a world history written by Europeans. An abiding concern with the formation within Western discursive practices of colonial and post colonial subject, as well as of the categories by means of which this subject conceives itself and perceives the world within which it lives and acts. A major element in the post colonial agenda is to disestablish Eurocentric norms of literary and artistic values and to expand the literary canon to include colonial and post colonial writers. In the United States and Britain, there is an increasingly successful movement to include in the standard academic curricula the brilliant and innovative novels, poems, and plays by such post-colonial writers in the English language as the Africans, Chinua Achebe and Walt Soyinka, the Caribbean islanders V.S. Naipaul and Derek Walcott, and the authors from the Indian subcontinent G.V. Desai and Salman Rushdie. What post-colonial critics do? They reject the claims to universalism made on behalf of canonical Western literature and seek to show its limitations of outlook, especially its general inability to emphasize across boundaries of cultural and ethnic difference. They examine the representation of other cultures in literature as a way of achieving this end. They show how much such literature is often evasively and crucially silent on matters concerned with colonization and imperialism. They foreground questions of cultural difference and diversity and examine their treatment in relevant literary works. They celebrate hybridity and cultural polyvalency, that is, the situation whereby individuals and groups belong simultaneously to more than one culture. For instance, that of colonizer through a colonial school system and that of the colonized through local and oral traditions. They develop a perspective not just applicable to post-colonial literatures whereby states of marginality, plurality, and perceived otherness are seen as sources of energy and potential change. Significance of studying post-colonial literature. The term post-colonialism is widely refers to the representation of race, ethnicity, culture, and human identity in the modern era, mostly after many colonized countries got their independence. It is the literature and the art produced in the countries such as India, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Senegal, and Australia after their independence called post-colonial literature. Edward Said's prominent book Orientalism is an assessment of Western representation of the Eastern culture under the label post-colonial studies. Post-colonial authors. The four names appear again and again as thinkers who have shaped post-colonial theory are Frantz Fanon, Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. And their main famous texts are Location of Culture by Homi K. Bhabha, Orientalism by Edward Said, Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, and Can the Subaltern Speak by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Though all these writers had different lands, nationalities, and social backgrounds, they could all create their own distinction in producing wonderful works of literature, of which many would certainly come under label post-colonial literature. Post-colonialism literature in English. One of the most influential novels of post-colonialism is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, exploring the interaction between traditional African society and British colonizers. In this novel, the character Okonovo struggles to understand and cope up with the changes got from Christianity and British control. His novel examines various situations occurred after the post-independence fictional West African village. Achebe conveyed through his novels how the British legacies continue to weaken possibility of uniting the country. Achebe got the Man Booker International Prize in 2007 for his literary merit. The central ideas in post-colonial literature. Post-colonial has many common motifs and themes like cultural dominance, racism, quest for identity, inequality, along with some peculiar presentation styles. In post-colonial context, language played a crucial role in control and subjugation of colonized people. Colonizers often imposed their language upon their subjects in order to control them, so post-colonial writers address the issues in many ways, and mixing local language with imposed language, the result is a hybrid one that underscores the broken nature of the colonized mind. Post-colonialism and its reflections. The colonial countries started writing and depicting the experiences of colonization and many changes brought by independence upon individuals and their respective nations.
Camera is on. Light is off, sir. Okay. No, sir. Light is not.
Some filmmakers also attempted to depict colonial and post-colonial predicaments in their films. Satyajit Ray, Deepa Mehta, Meera Nair, Shyam Benegal, and a few among the filmmakers who contributed to post-colonialism. In fact, as post-colonial literature deals with framing identities, the politics of rewriting, translations, relation between nation and nationalism, it is a most dominant form of literature and it has a great appeal. The concept of transnation, all these subjects, all these citizens moving around the borders of state, the nation has always tried to identify a certain identity for itself. Now in young nations such as Australia, this becomes almost an obsession. As it grows, people are obsessed with the idea of Australian national identity and probably in India too. The idea of national identity is something that people can escape really whether they are drawn to it or not. But this picture shows the actual multiplicity of a nation of the different strands that go to make it. Could be put in another way that a nation is a big tossed salad. As we know, a tossed salad does not have an identity, a single strand running through it, but it's made of many different factors, features, ethnicities, peoples, and this we call the transnation. So we can say that in that single nation there are different identities and all are mixed like a salad. Waiting for the Barbarians. Waiting for the Barbarians is a Greek poem by Constantine Caffey in his collected poems translated by Edmund Kelley and Philip Sherrard. The poem was written in November 1898 and first published in 1904. It depicts a day in an unnamed city where everything has come to a halt because the population is awaiting the arrival of the barbarians whom they plan to welcome. Waiting for Barbarians end with the empire's government officials abandoning the town as winter approaches in fear that the barbarian invasion. Why this is the poem. Why this sudden bewilderment, this confusion, how serious people's faces have become, why are the streets and squares emptying so rapidly, everyone going home lost in thought. Because night has fallen and barbarians haven't come, and some of our men just in from the border say there are no barbarians any longer. Now what's going to happen to us without barbarians? Those people were kind of solution. So people are totally dependent on barbarians. This is, we can say, the impact, and because of so much they are under colonizers' rule. So now they are dependent on them. Here in the above poem, it brilliantly captures, as perhaps only poetry can do, the complex role that borders have. The barbarians, the others, those who are just beyond our borders, they are the ones who, because of their difference, help us to understand who we are. They are a kind of solution because they demonstrate who we are not, and that gives us some kind of purchase on the idea of self, and particular on the myth of national self. This poem shows us that borders are unfortunately very important. They are important to the state. They are very important in helping people understand or think that they understand who they are by defining who they are not. If a line is drawn internally, the network of institutional mechanisms through which a certain social and political order is maintained. Once we realize that borders are not structures but practices, we see these bordering practices extending within the nation state, and these include rules, laws, restrictions, surveillance, and more subtle forms of pressure. These are my citations. Thank you.
Okay, questions to Khushbu?
Hello, Khushbu. My question is, what's the impact of colonialism in India?
Unmute your mic, Khushbu.
The ultimate goal of the colonialism was certainly a far more traumatizing experience for colonial subjects than their colonizers. They suffered poverty, malnutrition, disease, cultural upheaval, economic exploitation, political disadvantage, and systematic programs aimed at creating a sense of social and racial inferiority.
Khushbu, my question is, what is the function of post-colonial literature?
Post-colonial literature often addressed the problems and consequences of decolonization of a country, especially questions relating to the political and cultural independence of formerly subjugated people, and themes such as racialism and colonialism. Thank you.
Okay, fine. That was the last presentation.